If you want a government that still works when everyone's angry, you don't need better people, you need better brakes. Imagine it's 1788 and you're not a political theorist. You're a citizen trying to make it to next week. You hear the arguments everywhere, at the tavern, in churchyards, along the docks, in the market. A stronger national government will save us, as well as a stronger national government will enslave us. It doesn't feel like a debate club. It feels like a fight over whether your money will hold value, whether trade will survive, whether the states will keep turning on each other, and whether the country can respond to the next crisis without unraveling. Then you see a newspaper essay signed by Publius. It isn't a victory speech. It reads like a manual. The writers, Hamilton, Madison, and Jay, aren't promising a perfect government. They're saying the opposite. Power will always try to grow, and people will always try to use government to win. So the only safe plan is a government designed to resist itself. That's the Federalist pitch in plain terms. We're not asking you to trust rulers. We're offering you a system with brakes. And that's what makes the Federalist Papers so different. They're not a love letter to power. They're an attempt to build a machine that can handle permanent conflict without breaking the people living under it. A government built for permanent conflict. The Federalists start from an uncomfortable truth. In a free society, disagreement is normal. Different regions want different trade rules. Different communities fear different threats. Farmers and merchants don't always want the same policies. And religious and cultural differences don't disappear just because you declared independence. So the question isn't, how do we eliminate conflict? The question is, how do we keep conflict from turning into domination? The anti-federalists warned that a stronger national government could become distant, elite, and forceful, too far away to control, too powerful to resist. The Federalists didn't dismiss that fear. They treated it like a design requirement. They basically said, yes, that's what power does if you build a system that depends on virtue. So we won't build a system that depends on virtue. We'll build a system that assumes politicians want credit, leaders want legacy, factions want wins, and power expands unless it's constrained. That's why this part of the story matters. The Constitution wasn't written for a society of angels. It was written for a society where people are always pushing, always competing, always trying to win. And the machine they designed, this is where Federalist 51 and 78 come in, was meant to channel those pressures so the country doesn't snap every time the temperature rises. Federalist 51, the safety system. Think of Federalist 51 like a practical safety system, not theory, safety. If you're building a wagon that has to roll through storms, the question is not, will someone grab the reins? The question is, what happens when they do? Federalist 51 says, don't give one part of government the whole vehicle. Split power across branches, and then give each branch tools to resist the others. Not because you hate government, but because you understand incentives. This is where the Federalists get brutally realistic. Ambition is not going away. So you don't defeat ambition with speeches. You use ambition to fight ambition. One branch writes laws, but can't enforce them. One branch enforces laws, but can't rewrite them. One branch interprets laws, but can't command an army or control the budget. In other words, no one branch gets to run away with the car. And here's the what could go wrong next week version. What happens when a scary event hits and everyone demands immediate action? What happens when a popular leader claims the process is too slow? What happens when a faction insists the ends justify the means, just this once? Federalist 51 is designed for those moments. It slows decisions down when fear is trying to speed them up. It forces negotiation when outrage wants shortcuts. It makes it hard to turn a temporary panic into a permanent rule. The machine isn't trying to stop government from acting. It's trying to stop government from acting without resistance. Because resistance is the difference between law and command. Resistance is what makes persuasion necessary. Resistance is what keeps power from becoming effortless. And if power becomes effortless, it becomes endless. So Federalist 51 doesn't say, trust us. It says, distrust everyone equally and build that distrust into the structure. Federalist 78, the referee. Now the story shifts to the branch many citizens feared most, the judiciary. In 1788, judges sounded like distant elites, appointed, insulated, difficult to remove. People worried that courts would become unaccountable rulers in robes. Federalist 78 answers that fear with a surprising claim. The judiciary is the least dangerous branch. Not because judges are always wise, but because courts don't control money and they don't control armies. No purse, no sword, only judgment. A court can write an opinion, but it can't enforce that opinion by itself. Its real power is legitimacy, the public belief that the court is doing its job. And that means the system only works if judges act like judges, not lawmakers. A referee doesn't play the game. A referee enforces the rules of the game. If a court becomes a second legislature, it may get short-term wins, but it loses the one thing it can't survive without: legitimacy. And when legitimacy collapses, the country doesn't get clarity. It gets a fight over who has the right to rule at all. Federalist 78 is a warning and a safeguard at the same time. It's saying, yes, you should be cautious about judges. That's why the courts were designed with limited direct power. But it also says, courts must practice restraint, because the referee only matters if people believe the referee is neutral. In a society built for permanent conflict, the judiciary is supposed to be a stabilizer, not an engine of policy, not a political weapon, a stabilizer. And if the stabilizer becomes a weapon, it doesn't just fail, it destabilizes everything else. So here's what the Federalists were really offering in 1788. Not a promise of good rulers, a promise of restraints that still work when rulers are not good. They didn't assume conflict would end. They assumed conflict would be permanent. They didn't assume power would behave. They assumed power would push. So they built a machine meant to survive normal human nature: ambition, fear, rivalry, faction, pride, and the hunger for control. Federalist 51 gives you the brakes, checks, and balances that make it hard for any one part of government to dominate. Federalist 78 gives you the referee, a judiciary that has legitimacy, not force, and that only works when it practices restraint. And it all comes down to one idea that feels almost too honest to say out loud. The Constitution isn't asking you to trust power, it's asking you to distrust it on purpose, and then channel that distrust into structure. The question for every generation is whether we maintain that machine, or whether we try to bypass it the moment it slows us down. The fight for liberty never ends, it only changes hands.